She fed the dying alien predator, they whispered in fear, and now it burns worlds to keep her safe. As military vessels descended upon Iridia, Korath emerged transformed, his body fused with ship components, channeling devastating energy that reduced warships to superheated plasma. In that moment of terrifying beauty, Alara witnessed the ultimate consequence of her compassion: absolute protection, absolutely enforced. The distant sun of Iridia Prime cast long shadows across the crystalline sands as Dr. Alara Miles adjusted her observation equipment. From her vantage point in Aurelia Station's primary observatory dome, the desert planet's surface shimmered like a sea of diamonds, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. She tapped a series of commands into her console, focusing the high-powered magnification on a ripple in the dunes that indicated subterranean movement. "Mercury, are you recording this?" Alara asked, her voice carrying the slight rasp that came from 2 years of speaking to no one but an artificial intelligence. "Always, Dr. Miles," responded the station AI, its voice modulated to sound reassuringly human while remaining distinctly synthetic. "Sandworm migration pattern Alpha 73 is proceeding exactly as you predicted. May I suggest this confirms your hypothesis regarding their response to the third moon's gravitational influence?" Alara nodded, tucking a strand of her dark hair behind her ear. At 34, she'd become accustomed to the solitude of Aurelia Station. The remote research outpost had been her home since Earth Central Command had approved her grant proposal. Barely. Funding for pure research had become increasingly scarce as humanity struggled to maintain its tenuous position among the various alien empires that dominated the galactic political landscape. "The migration patterns are consistent, but I'm more interested in the biochemical analysis of their venom samples," she replied, eyes still fixed on the moving dunes. "If I can isolate the neurotoxic compound that allows them to paralyze prey 100 times their size, we might have a breakthrough for treating neural degenerative diseases." Mercury's holographic avatar, a silver-blue sphere that pulsed in time with its speech, materialized beside her workstation. "Your optimism is admirable, though statistically unfounded. May I remind you that your quarterly progress report is due in 3 standard days, and that Earth Central has flagged your last 2 submissions as insufficiently profitable." Alara sighed. "Saving lives isn't profitable enough, apparently." "The corporation values life-saving research," Mercury replied with program diplomacy. "They simply prefer research that saves wealthy lives." Despite herself, Alara smiled. Mercury's personality matrix had developed some interesting quirks during their time together. She sometimes wondered if the isolation affected AIs as much as it did humans. She was about to respond when an alert flashed across her console. "What's this?" "Unidentified debris detected in Iridia's southern canyon system," Mercury reported. "Satellite imagery suggests artificial origin. Impact occurred approximately 7 hours ago during the sandstorm that blocked our sensors." Alara frowned, pulling up the visual feed. The grainy image showed a deep gouge in the planet's surface, ending in what appeared to be a partially buried metallic structure. "That's no debris," she murmured. "That's a ship. And given the entry trajectory and impact severity, it wasn't a controlled landing." "Correct assessment. The craft does not match any registered human vessel designs. I must remind you that protocol requires immediate notification of Earth Central Command regarding any potential extraterrestrial contact." Alara bit her lip. Considering, Earth Central would take weeks to respond, and they'd likely send a military unit rather than a scientific team. By then, any survivors would be dead, and any unique technology would be classified and disappeared into some corporate black site. "We'll notify them after preliminary assessment," she decided. "Prep the rover. I'm going to check it out." "Dr. Miles, I must emphasize that direct contact with unknown extraterrestrial entities violates at least 7 safety protocols and 3 interstellar regulatory statutes. Alara was already heading toward the equipment room. Log your objection, Mercury. Then help me pack the portable medkit and geological sampling tools. If there are survivors, they might need medical attention. The statistical likelihood of finding survivors after such an impact is less than 8%, Mercury noted, though its avatar followed her. And the likelihood of being able to render effective medical assistance to an unknown species is even lower. Then, we'll be pleasantly surprised if we succeed, Alara replied, pulling on her environment suit. The white and orange protective gear was designed to shield her from Iridia's harsh conditions, temperatures that fluctuated between blistering heat during the day and bone-chilling cold at night. Not to mention the crystalline sand that could flay skin from bone during the frequent windstorms. As she sealed her helmet and checked the oxygen levels, Alara couldn't quite name the emotion she was feeling. Excitement. Certainly, this was the first real break in her monotonous routine in months. Curiosity. Of course. What kind of ship was it? And who piloted it? But there was something else too. A premonition, perhaps. A sense that whatever she found in that canyon would change everything. Mercury, download your mobile extension to my suit systems, she instructed, as she made her way to the airlock. I want you with me on this one. I have never understood the human tendency to anthropomorphize AI systems, Mercury commented, as its consciousness transferred to her suit's computer. But I appreciate the sentiment. Dr. Miles. The airlock cycled, and Alara stepped out onto the platform where her rover waited. The 8-wheeled vehicle, with its reinforced chassis and dust-filtered engine, was her lifeline on the planet's surface. She climbed in, initiated the startup sequence, and began the descent down the station's access ramp onto the shifting sands below. As she drove toward the southern canyons, the wind began to pick up, sending swirls of glittering sand across her path. The twin suns of the Iridia system were beginning their slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson. Beautiful, isn't it? She said, more to herself than to Mercury. Beauty is subjective, the AI replied. But the spectral analysis does indicate light wavelengths that human visual systems typically find aesthetically pleasing. Alara laughed. One day, Mercury, you'll understand why that answer misses the point entirely. The journey to the southern canyons took nearly 3 hours, during which Alara observed the shifting landscape with the practiced eye of a scientist who had spent years studying this harsh world. She noted new formations in the dunes, cataloged the brief appearance of a sandworm breaching the surface like an oceanic leviathan, and collected atmospheric data that showed an unusual increase in metallic particulates, likely from the crashed ship. As she approached the canyon ridge, she slowed the rover. The ravine below stretched like an open wound across the planet's surface, its walls stratified with layers of compressed minerals that told the story of Iridia's geological past. And there, at the bottom, half buried in the glittering sand, lay the crashed vessel. Mercury, are you seeing this? Alara whispered, her breath catching. Affirmative. The vessel architecture appears consistent with Zathar design principles. Alara felt her blood run cold. The Zathar were among the most feared predatory species in the known galaxy. 8-foot-tall apex hunters, with exoskeletal armor, and a reputation for annihilating entire colonies that encroached on their territory. Humanity had maintained an uneasy truce with them, only by staying well out of their way. What would a Zathar ship be doing this far from their territories? She wondered aloud, even as she began navigating the rover down a winding path to the canyon floor. Unknown. However, I must now insist on contacting Earth Central immediately. Zathar presence in this sector represents a potential military threat of the highest order. Alara's hands tightened on the steering controls. Not yet. If this is a scout ship for an invasion, we need more information before we alert anyone. And if it's something else, I need to know what a Zathar was doing alone, so far from home. She brought the rover to a stop about 50 meters from the crashed ship. Up close, the vessel was even more alien, a sleek, predatory shape of dark metal that seemed to absorb rather than reflect light. Parts of its hull appeared almost organic, with surfaces that rippled subtly, despite the absence of wind at the canyon floor. Biometallic construction, Alara noted, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her apprehension. The Zathar integrate living tissue with their technology. Fascinating. Fascinating and highly dangerous, Mercury countered. Scans indicate the ship's systems are still partially active, and there are faint life signs emanating from within. Dr. Miles, I strongly advise retreat at this time. But Alara was already checking her suit's integrity and gathering her equipment. Life signs mean a survivor. Mercury, wounded, from the looks of that crash. This is a unique opportunity to establish peaceful contact with a Zathar. Think about the scientific potential. I am thinking about the significantly higher potential for your immediate dismemberment, Mercury replied dryly. Zathar are not known for their diplomatic reception of other species. Then I'll just have to be extra charming, Alara said, forcing levity into her voice to mask her own trepidation. She exited the rover, medkit in hand, and approached the vessel cautiously. The ship had carved a deep furrow through the canyon floor before coming to rest against one wall. Its hull was breached in several places, revealing glimpses of the interior, a labyrinth of corridors that seemed to pulse with a dim, reddish light. As Alara drew closer, she noticed what appeared to be a fluid leaking from one of the larger ruptures, thick and dark, with an iridescent sheen that reminded her of oil, but which she suspected was something far more vital to the ship's occupant. Finding what looked like an entry point, a jagged tear in the hull large enough for her to slip through, Alara hesitated for just a moment. Then, driven by a mixture of scientific curiosity and genuine concern, she entered the alien vessel. Inside, the air was thick with an acrid, metallic scent that penetrated even her suit's filters. The corridors were narrow and curved in ways that made no sense to human architectural sensibilities, forcing her to duck and sidestep as she followed the trail of fluid deeper into the ship. The life signs are growing stronger, Mercury reported through her suit's speakers. Approximately 20 meters ahead, but I must note that the biosignature is extremely erratic. Whatever awaits you is severely compromised. Injured, Alara corrected gently. Not compromised. There's a living being ahead who needs help. She rounded a bend in the corridor and found herself in what appeared to be the ship's control center. The space was dominated by technology that defied easy categorization. Part mechanical, part biological, with pulsing conduits that resembled veins and arteries more than wiring. And there, slumped in what she presumed was the pilot's position, was the Zathar. Even wounded and unconscious, the alien was an imposing sight. Standing, it would have towered over her by at least 2 feet. Its body was covered in an exoskeletal armor of deep crimson and obsidian black, with spikes protruding from its joints and spine. Its head was elongated, with no visible eyes in the human sense, but rather sensory pits that ran along what would be its forehead. A severe gash ran from its shoulder to its midsection, leaking the same iridescent fluid she'd followed from the hull breach. "Mercury," she whispered, "are you recording this?" "Affirmative, along with my continued objection to your presence in the immediate vicinity of a predator species that considers humans suitable prey." Alara approached cautiously. "Medkit ready." "It's dying. Mercury. Whatever brought it here, whatever mission or malfunction or mistake, it won't survive without immediate intervention. Protocol is clear. Dr. Miles, in the event of encountering wounded hostile extraterrestrials, standard procedure is to either withdraw and allow nature to take its course, or to notify military authorities for proper containment. Alara had reached the Zathar's side now, Up close, she could see the subtle rise and fall of its chest plate, shallow and irregular. Its exoskeleton had partially retracted around the wound, revealing softer tissue beneath that pulsed weakly with each labored breath. "I can't do that," she said softly, not to Mercury, but to herself, a confirmation of a decision already made in her heart. "I can't let any sentient being perish alone. Mercury, not even a Zathar." Without waiting for the AI's inevitable objection, Alara began to assess the alien's injuries. The wound was deep, exposing what appeared to be internal organs, unlike anything in human anatomy. The iridescent fluid, blood, she presumed, was leaking steadily, though slower than before, which suggested the Zathar's biology included some form of coagulation mechanism. "I need to stabilize it for transport," she decided. "The medbay at Aurelia has better equipment than what I've brought. Dr. Miles, I must emphasize in the strongest possible terms that bringing a Zathar predator to Aurelia Station violates every security protocol in existence. Furthermore, your medical training, while impressive for human physiology, offers no basis for treating an organism with completely different biological systems." Alara was already preparing a stabilizing agent from her kit, a universal coagulant designed to work with a variety of carbon-based life forms. "Then, we'll learn as we go. Help me, Mercury, scan its biology, compare with known xenobiological databases. Give me something to work with." There was a pause, just long enough for Alara to know the AI was genuinely processing her request rather than simply following protocol. Before Mercury responded, "Preliminary scans suggest a copper-based circulatory system rather than iron-based like humans. The coagulant should be effective, but I recommend a 50% dilution to prevent potential toxic reactions. The creature's metabolism appears to be entering a state analogous to hibernation, likely a survival mechanism to preserve core functions." "Good," Alara nodded, adjusting the mixture accordingly. "That gives us time." She worked quickly, but carefully, applying the coagulant to the worst of the bleeding and then, using a portable tissue sealer to close the wound temporarily. Throughout the procedure, the Zathar remained unconscious, though occasionally a tremor would run through its massive frame, causing Alara to freeze momentarily in anticipation of it waking. When she had done all she could with her limited field equipment, she sat back on her heels and considered the logistical challenge ahead. "It's too big to move without help. I'll need to reconfigure the rover's cargo space and rig some kind of winch system. Or," Mercury suggested with what sounded almost like hope, "you could follow protocol, leave it here, and report the encounter from the safety of Aurelia Station." Alara shook her head, already standing to examine the confines of the crashed ship for potential exit routes. "Not an option. Prepare the rover systems for passenger transport. Mercury, we're bringing our new friend home." It took nearly 2 hours of careful engineering and improvisation, but Alara finally managed to extract the unconscious Zathar from the wreckage and secure it in the rover's reconfigured cargo area. The creature's weight, easily 3 times that of a human, made every step of the process a struggle, but adrenaline and determination saw her through. As they began the journey back to Aurelia Station, the twin suns had set, plunging the desert into a twilight that would soon give way to the absolute darkness of night. The temperature was already dropping rapidly, and Alara found herself grateful for the rover's environmental systems. "Mercury, begin compiling everything we know about Zathar biology," she instructed as she navigated the difficult terrain. "And prepare the medbay for emergency xenobiological procedures." "I have already initiated both processes," the AI replied. "I have also taken the liberty of securing all weapons systems and emergency containment protocols at the station. In the statistically unlikely event that your patient survives and proves less than grateful for your intervention." Alara glanced back at the massive form strapped securely in the cargo area. In the dim light of the rover's interior, the Zathar looked less like a fearsome predator and more like any wounded creature, vulnerable, fighting for life. "It'll survive," she said with more confidence than she felt. "And then we'll figure out the rest." The return journey to Aurelia Station was tense, with Alara constantly monitoring the Zathar's vital signs through her suit's sensors. By the time the research outpost's lights appeared on the horizon, a small cluster of illumination in the vast darkness of Iridia's night, the alien's condition had stabilized somewhat, though it remained deeply unconscious. Mercury had the airlock ready for them, along with an improvised stretcher system that used the station's cargo handling equipment to manage the Zathar's weight. Getting the alien from the rover to the medbay was a painstaking process, but Alara worked with focused intensity, aware that every minute counted. The medbay, designed for a single human occupant, seemed woefully inadequate for the task at hand. The Zathar barely fit on the reinforced examination table, its limbs hanging awkwardly over the edges. Alara immediately set to work, cutting away damaged portions of its exoskeleton to better access the wound beneath. "Mercury, I need detailed scans of its internal anatomy," she said, already reaching for surgical tools. "And keep monitoring its vital signs. Alert me to any changes immediately." Scans in progress," Mercury replied, its avatar hovering near the medical displays. "Though I feel compelled to point out that what you're attempting has no medical precedent. Zathar physiology is classified information, and what little data exists is military in nature, focused on their vulnerabilities rather than their care." "Then we'll write the precedent," Alara said grimly, studying the scans as they appeared on her screen. "Every living thing wants to survive. Mercury. That's the one universal constant we can count on." For the next several hours, Alara worked tirelessly, navigating the alien terrain of Zathar anatomy with nothing but educated guesses and Mercury's increasingly helpful analysis. She discovered that the Zathar's exoskeleton was not merely armor, but an integral part of its circulatory and nervous systems, with conduits that carried both the iridescent blood and what appeared to be neural signals. The wound had damaged several of these pathways, effectively cutting off parts of the alien's body from its central nervous system. Using techniques adapted from both human and veterinary medicine, supplemented by what little xenobiological research existed in Aurelia's databases, Alara repaired what she could. She reconnected severed conduits, synthesized a plasma substitute compatible with the alien's copper-based blood, and carefully removed fragments of the ship's hull that had embedded themselves in the Zathar's flesh. Throughout the procedure, she talked, partly to Mercury, partly to herself, and partly to the unconscious alien, explaining what she was doing, asking rhetorical questions about its biology, and occasionally expressing wonder at the elegant complexity of its systems. "The integration of exoskeleton and internal organs is remarkable," she noted, as she sealed a particularly delicate neural pathway. "It's almost as if the entire body is designed to function as both armor and sensory organs simultaneously. I wonder if their ships use similar principles. That would explain the biometallic construction." "An astute observation," Mercury commented. "The latest scans suggest neural activity is increasing. It may regain consciousness within the next few hours." Alara paused, surgical tools still in hand. "Are the restraints secure?" "Affirmative, though I calculate a 67% probability that they would prove insufficient if the subject were to exert its full strength." "Let's hope it's not feeling up to its full strength." "Then," Alara murmured, returning to her work, "and Mercury, let's start calling it him instead of it, or the subject. From what I can tell of the anatomy, this appears to be a male of the species. Anthropomorphizing a predatory alien is unlikely to improve our survival odds." "Dr. Miles." "Maybe not," she conceded, "but it improves my ability to think of him as a patient rather than a threat, And right now, that's what he is, a patient. By the time Alara had done all she could for the Zathar's injuries, exhaustion was beginning to take its toll. Her hands trembled slightly as she applied the final synthetic sealant to the wound, and her vision blurred occasionally, forcing her to blink hard to refocus. "You require rest, Dr. Miles," Mercury observed. "You have been awake for 27 consecutive hours, and your vital signs indicate significant physical and mental fatigue." Alara nodded, stepping back to survey her work. The Zathar's wound was closed, its vital signs stable, and its neural activity continuing to increase steadily. "I'll rest here," she decided, gesturing to a cot in the corner of the medbay. "I want to be present when he wakes up." A decision that combines admirable medical dedication with questionable survival instinct. Mercury noted, "I will maintain constant monitoring and alert you to any changes." Too tired to argue, Alara simply nodded and made her way to the cot. She removed only her outer gear, keeping her base uniform on in case she needed to move quickly. As she lay down, she found herself studying the alien form on the examination table, the rhythmic rise and fall of its chest plate, the occasional twitch of its clawed appendages, the strange beauty of its exoskeleton's patterns in the medbay's subdued lighting. "What were you doing out there alone?" she whispered, already drifting toward sleep. "So far from your kind." She was awakened sometime later by Mercury's urgent voice. "Dr. Miles, the subject is regaining consciousness. Estimated time to full awareness, 2 minutes." Alara jolted upright, instantly alert despite having slept for only a few hours. She moved quickly to the medical console, checking the Zathar's vital signs and neural activity. Heart rate increasing, respiratory function normalizing, neural pathways showing synchronized activity. She noted, "Mercury, initiate translation protocols. If he's capable of communication, I want to be able to understand it. Translation systems online, though I must note that our database of Zathar language is extremely limited. Communication may be rudimentary at best." Alara positioned herself where the Zathar would see her upon waking, but maintained a safe distance from the examination table. Despite her fatigue, she felt a surge of adrenaline as the alien's body tensed, a clear sign of returning consciousness. The Zathar's awakening was not the gradual process familiar to humans, but rather a sudden shift from unconsciousness to full alertness. One moment it lay still, the next, its body convulsed powerfully against the restraints, its head swinging toward Alara with predatory focus. A sound emerged from it, a high, chittering screech that made the hairs on the back of Alara's neck stand on end. The translation system offered nothing, suggesting the sound was a vocalization of pain or confusion rather than language. "Easy," Alara said, keeping her voice calm and even. "You're safe. You were injured. I brought you to my medical facility." The Zathar strained against its restraints, the examination table groaning under the stress. Its sensory pit seemed to fix on Alara, though without conventional eyes. It was difficult to be certain where its attention was directed. "Mercury, can you translate what I'm saying to him?" Alara asked, not taking her gaze from the alien. "Attempting simplified translation now," Mercury confirmed. A series of clicks, hisses, and low-frequency rumbles emanated from the station's speakers, an approximation of Zathar communication based on limited military recordings. The effect was immediate. The alien went still, its head tilting in what Alara interpreted as surprise or confusion. Then it responded with its own series of sounds, more complex and nuanced than Mercury's attempt. "Partial translation achieved," Mercury reported. "Approximate meaning. Prey speaks hunter tongue. Prey heals hunter. Why?" Alara took a careful step forward. "Tell him my name is Alara Miles. I'm a scientist. I study life. I found him injured and wanted to help." Mercury translated, and the Zathar listened, its body still tense but no longer straining against the restraints. Its response came after a long pause. Translation: Mercy is weakness. Death is natural. Why prevent? The question gave Alara pause. How could she explain compassion to a species that reportedly valued strength above all else? Tell him that among my kind, helping others isn't weakness. It's a different kind of strength. And I wanted to understand him, his species, his purpose here. As Mercury translated, Alara watched the Zathar's reactions closely. Its exoskeleton rippled in a way that suggested confusion or perhaps internal conflict. When it responded, its vocalizations were slower, more deliberate. Translation: I am Korath, scout of the Zathar Dominion. My mission has failed. Ship damaged. I should be dead. Korath, Alara repeated, testing the name. Tell Korath that his mission may have failed, but he survived. And now, perhaps, there can be a new mission, understanding between our species. Mercury translated, then added privately to Alara. Dr. Miles, the station's automated protocols have detected the presence of a non-human life form and initiated a quarantine alert to Iridia Central Governance. We can expect a corporate response within days. Alara felt a flicker of anxiety, but kept her expression neutral as Korath responded. Translation: No understanding. Humans are prey species, weak, but you, not weak like others, strange. I'll take that as a compliment, Alara said with a small smile. Tell him I'm going to approach to check his wound. Ask if that's acceptable. After Mercury's translation, Korath made a gesture that involved extending and then relaxing his clawed appendages. Mercury interpreted this as assent, and Alara cautiously approached the examination table. As she checked the healing wound, she was acutely aware of Korath's attention fixed on her every movement. The Zathar remained tense, but made no aggressive moves as she examined the sealed gash and the surrounding exoskeleton. The wound is healing well, she reported, as much to Korath as to her own medical log. The synthetic sealant is integrating with your natural healing processes. The damage to your neural pathways is repairing itself at a remarkable rate. When Mercury translated, Korath responded with what sounded like a short bark. He says, of course, Zathar heal quickly. Weak flesh dies, strong flesh lives. Alara nodded, stepping back to a more comfortable distance. Ask him what he was doing in this sector. The Zathar Dominion is several systems away. The question prompted a longer response from Korath, accompanied by gestures that seemed to indicate directions or locations in space. Translation is fragmentary, Mercury warned. But he appears to be describing a scouting mission to assess potential expansion territories. His ship was damaged in an asteroid field, and he was attempting to make emergency repairs in an uninhabited system when system failure forced him to crash land on Iridia. So not an invasion, Alara mused. Just exploration. I would note that for the Zathar, exploration and invasion are often synonymous, Mercury added privately. Alara considered this, then addressed Korath again. Tell him that I understand exploration. It's why I'm here too. But Earth, humans, have treaties with the Zathar Dominion. This sector is recognized as human territory. Korath's response was immediate and accompanied by what Alara interpreted as a dismissive gesture. Translation: Treaties are temporary. Space is vast. Strong claim territory. Weak lose it. Charming perspective, Alara muttered. Mercury, explain that while he recovers, he is under my protection. But I should warn him that others are coming, humans who may not be as understanding as I am. As Mercury translated, Korath's posture changed subtly, a tensing of his powerful limbs and a slight lifting of the spines along his back. His response was brief, but forceful. He says, I need no protection from prey. When strength returns, I will reclaim my ship and continue mission. Alara sighed. This was going to be more challenging than she'd hoped. Tell him his ship is severely damaged. The propulsion system is completely destroyed, and the hull integrity is compromised beyond repair with the resources available on this planet. He's not going anywhere soon. The translation appeared to agitate Korath. He pulled against his restraints with renewed vigor, making the entire examination table shift several inches across the floor. His vocalizations took on a harsher, more guttural quality that required no translation to convey his displeasure. "Mercury, what's he saying?" Alara asked, taking an involuntary step back. "The translation is colorful. Essentially, he is expressing disbelief and demanding to be released to verify your claims about his vessel." Alara considered her options. Keeping Korath restrained indefinitely wasn't feasible, especially with corporate inspectors on the way. But releasing a potentially hostile Zathar within the station carried its own obvious risks. "Tell him I will release him under certain conditions," she decided. "First, he must agree not to harm me or damage the station. Second, he must accept that I saved his life and am continuing to treat his injuries, which gives me some claim on his cooperation under any reasonable code of honor." Mercury translated, adding with obvious disapproval, "I feel compelled to point out that assuming a Zathar adheres to anything resembling a reasonable code of honor by human standards is optimistic to the point of delusion." Korath's response was a long time coming. He seemed to be considering Alara's words carefully, his exoskeleton shifting through subtle color variations that she suspected reflected his internal deliberation. Finally, he spoke, a shorter, more measured series of vocalizations. Translation: "I will not harm the healer prey Alara. This is debt, but I must see my ship, assess damage myself." "Progress," Alara murmured. "Tell him I'll take him to his ship when he's stronger. For now, he needs to rest and continue healing. And tell him my name is Alara, not Healer Prey." After Mercury's translation, Korath made a sound that the AI surprisingly interpreted as laughter. A rasping, clicking noise that sent an involuntary shiver down Alara's spine. "He says, all humans are prey, but you are prey that heals. This is new concept. I will consider." "I suppose that's the best we can hope for at the moment," Alara said, allowing herself a small smile. "Mercury, begin reducing the restraint tension gradually. Let's see how our guest behaves with a little more freedom. Dr. Miles, I must register my strongest objection to this course of action." "Objection noted," Alara replied firmly. "Proceed with restraint reduction." As the mechanical restraints loosened incrementally, Korath tested each one, his powerful limbs flexing against the decreased resistance. But true to his word, he made no sudden moves or aggressive gestures toward Alara. Instead, he slowly sat up on the examination table, his full height even more imposing in this position. For a long moment, predator and human regarded each other in silence, a tableau of impossible contradiction. Then, Korath extended one clawed appendage, palm up, in what appeared to be a deliberate gesture. "Mercury, what does that mean?" Alara asked quietly. "Unknown. This gesture is not in our database of Zathar communications." Taking a calculated risk, Alara extended her own hand, palm up, mirroring the alien's posture. Korath brought his massive clawed hand to hover just above hers, not touching, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his exoskeleton. He emitted a low, thrumming sound that vibrated the air between them. Translation attempt. Life debt acknowledged. Korath remembers who feeds the dying hunter. It was in that moment, human and Zathar reaching across species boundaries in a tentative gesture of mutual recognition, that the station alarms began to wail, shattering the fragile peace. "Mercury, what's happening?" Alara demanded, pulling her hand back instinctively. "Incoming transmission from Iridia Governet." The AI reported. "Corporate inspection vessel Oversight has entered orbit and is requesting immediate docking clearance. They are aware of the quarantine alert and are invoking emergency override protocols." Korath, had gone rigid at the sound of the alarms, his posture shifting into what Alara recognized as a defensive stance. The spines along his back had fully extended, and his exoskeleton had darkened to a deep crimson, a warning coloration, she suspected. "Tell him it's not an attack," she said quickly to Mercury. "Explain that these are my people, but that they might not understand why I've helped him. Tell him to remain calm and let me handle this." As Mercury translated, Alara moved to the communication console and opened a channel to the approaching vessel. "Aurelia Station to Corporate Vessel Oversight. This is Dr. Alara Miles. I acknowledge your approach and am prepared to explain the quarantine situation. Request time to secure my research before docking." The response was immediate and unyielding. A stern, male voice filled the medbay. "Dr. Miles, this is Commander Halverson of Corporate Security. Your request is denied. Prepare for immediate boarding and inspection. The nature of the quarantine alert has been classified as a potential first contact scenario with a hostile species. Corporate protocol dictates immediate containment and assessment." Alara glanced at Korath, who was watching her with what she interpreted as wary attention. "Commander, I must insist on time to properly secure both my patient and my research data. The situation is stable but delicate. Patient is not the appropriate designation for a Zathar predator." "Dr. Miles," Halverson replied coldly, "your actions in bringing such a creature to a corporate facility represent a severe breach of protocol. Prepare for boarding in 30 minutes. Any attempt to obstruct the inspection team will result in immediate termination of your research contract and possible criminal charges. Oversight out." As the communication cut off, Alara turned to face Korath, who had clearly understood enough of the exchange to recognize the threat it represented. "Mercury, tell him exactly what's happening," she instructed. "No softening the truth. He deserves to know." After Mercury's translation, Korath's response was a series of sharp, staccato vocalizations that the AI struggled to interpret. "He is using military terminology, not well represented in our database," Mercury explained. "But the essence appears to be a question about whether these newcomers intend to capture or kill him, and what your position is in this conflict." Alara approached Korath directly, maintaining eye contact with his sensory pits. "Tell him I did not save his life, only to hand him over to those who would harm him. But I need him to trust me and follow my lead if we're both going to survive what comes next." When Mercury finished translating, Korath was silent for a long moment. Then he extended both clawed hands, palms up, in an expansion of the gesture from before. Translation: "The hunter is in the healer's territory. I will follow, for now." Alara nodded, relief washing through her. "Good. Then we need to move quickly. Mercury, initiate research protection protocols. Lock down all data related to Korath's treatment and biology. Then prepare the secondary lab for secure containment. Make it look like proper quarantine measures while actually creating a defensible position. Dr. Miles, I feel compelled to point out that what you're suggesting amounts to corporate espionage at best and treason at worst." "No," Alara said firmly. "What I'm suggesting is ethical scientific practice and basic humanitarian principles. Korath is a sentient being who has agreed to cooperate peacefully. I will not allow him to be treated as a military asset or a laboratory specimen." She turned back to Korath. "Can you walk? We need to move to a more secure location." After Mercury's translation, Korath rose from the examination table in a single fluid movement that belied his recent injuries. Standing at his full height, he towered over Alara, his exoskeleton gleaming under the medbay lights. Translation: "I can fight if necessary." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," Alara replied grimly. "Follow me." As they made their way through Aurelia Station's corridors toward the secondary laboratory, Alara couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of the situation. A human scientist leading a Zathar predator to safety from her own kind. Yet, something about it felt right, as though all her years of studying life had led to this moment of standing up for it, regardless of its form. The secondary lab was smaller than the medbay, but more isolated, with only one entry point and thick walls designed to contain potentially hazardous experiments. Alara quickly reconfigured the space, setting up monitoring equipment to continue tracking Korath's recovery, while Mercury secured the station's systems against external override. "The corporate vessel will dock in 18 minutes, Mercury informed them. "I have implemented your requested security measures, though I must note they are unlikely to withstand a determined corporate security team for long." Alara nodded, checking the final preparations. "It buys us time to negotiate. That's all we need." She turned to Korath, who had been observing her work with what appeared to be interest. "Mercury, ask him if there's anything specific about Zathar biology or customs that I should know before the inspection team arrives. Anything that might help me protect him." After the translation, Korath's response was longer and more complex than his previous communications, accompanied by gestures toward his exoskeleton and the healing wound. "He says that Zathar bond through survival challenges," Mercury translated. "His life debt to you has created what he calls a territorial marker, a biochemical recognition that designates you as—" The translation is imprecise, but approximately not prey, or perhaps pack-adjacent. "He is producing pheromones that identify you as under his protection." "That's unexpected," Alara said, surprised. "Ask him what that means in practical terms." Korath's answer was brief but significant. Translation: "It means I will kill those who threaten you." Alara felt a chill run down her spine. "Tell him that's not necessary. Tell him I appreciate the sentiment, but I need him to remain non-violent unless absolutely forced to defend himself. These are my people, despite our disagreement." Mercury translated, and Korath made a gesture that Alara was beginning to recognize as reluctant acceptance. His response, however, was less reassuring. He says, "Zathar do not make empty threats. The bond is formed. Those who threaten the healer threaten the hunter." Before Alara could formulate a response, Mercury interrupted. "Corporate vessel oversight has completed docking procedures ahead of schedule. Security team approaching main airlock. Estimated time to breach, 3 minutes. "So much for negotiation time," Alara muttered. "Mercury, open a communication channel to Commander Halverson. I want to try once more to establish terms." "Channel open, Dr. Miles." Alara squared her shoulders. "Commander Halverson, this is Dr. Alara Miles. I need to inform you that the Zathar is conscious and cooperative. He poses no immediate threat and is recovering from severe injuries. I request that your security team remain unarmed during inspection to avoid any perception of hostility." The commander's voice, when it came, was tight with barely contained anger. "Dr. Miles, you are in no position to make requests. My team will proceed as protocol dictates for containment of Class A hostile entities. Stand down and prepare to be relieved of duty." "Commander, please," Alara tried again, desperation creeping into her voice. "The situation is delicate but stable. Armed intervention will only escalate." "Airlock breach detected," Mercury interrupted. "Security team entering main corridor." Alara turned to Korath, who had moved into a position that placed himself between her and the laboratory door. His exoskeleton had shifted to its darkest crimson hue, and the spines along his back were fully extended. "Mercury, tell him one last time, no violence unless absolutely necessary. These humans don't understand what's happening here." As Mercury translated, the sound of booted feet echoed from the corridor outside, drawing steadily closer to their position. Korath's only response was a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the floor of the laboratory. The door to the secondary lab slid open to reveal Commander Halverson, a tall, severe man in a corporate security uniform, flanked by 4 armed officers. Their weapons, neural disruptors designed for non-lethal containment, were raised and pointed directly at Korath. For a tense moment, no one moved. Halverson's cold gaze shifted from the imposing figure of the Zathar to Alara, who had stepped forward to place herself partially between the security team and Korath. "Dr. Miles," Halverson said with dangerous calm, "step away from the hostile entity immediately." "Commander, there's no need for weapons," Alara replied, keeping her voice steady. "As you can see, the Zathar, his name is Korath, is not restrained and has made no aggressive moves. He's recovering from injuries and has agreed to peaceful cooperation." Halvorson's expression hardened. "Your judgment has been compromised. Doctor, the Zathar are known predators with numerous documented attacks on human settlements. Step aside, or my officers will remove you." Alara held her ground. "Korath crashed on Iridia. I found him injured and provided medical treatment. He has acknowledged a life debt and poses no threat to those who don't threaten him. Lower your weapons, and we can discuss this rationally." "This is your final warning," Halverson snapped, signaling his officers to advance. "Stand down or—" He never finished the sentence. With a speed that belied his massive frame, Korath moved, interposing himself fully between Alara and the security team. The motion was so swift that the officers barely had time to react before the Zathar emitted a deafening screech that reverberated through the confined space of the laboratory. The lead officer fired his neural disruptor. The energy pulse struck Korath's exoskeleton and dissipated harmlessly, absorbed by the alien's natural armor. In response, Korath extended one clawed hand toward the officer, and in a display that would later feature in a dozen classified reports, projected a lance of bioenergy that struck the man's weapon, melting it instantly and sending him stumbling backward with a cry of pain. "Hold your fire!" Alara shouted, but it was too late. The remaining officers opened fire simultaneously, their neural disruptors creating a web of energy that engulfed Korath momentarily. For a heartbeat, the Zathar went rigid. Then, with a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of Aurelia Station, he surged forward. What followed was a blur of motion and sound, claws flashing, officers scattering, equipment crashing to the floor as Korath tore through the security team with terrifying efficiency. Alara found herself pressed against the laboratory wall, watching in horror as Korath systematically disarmed and disabled the officers. She noted with a mix of relief and disbelief that he was not killing them, merely incapacitating them with precise strikes that left them unconscious or pinned beneath overturned equipment. Only Halverson remained standing, his neural disruptor discarded in favor of a sidearm that Alara recognized with a surge of dread as a lethal capacity plasma pistol. The commander had it leveled at Korath's head, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Commander, don't!" Alara lunged forward, but she knew she would be too late. The plasma pistol discharged with a high-pitched whine. The bolt of superheated plasma shot toward Korath, but instead of striking the Zathar, it seemed to bend in midair, arcing around his body before dissipating against the laboratory wall in a shower of sparks. Halvorsen stared in disbelief, firing again with the same result. Korath advanced on him inexorably, exoskeleton rippling with energy patterns that Alara had never seen before. "Mercury!" she called out, desperate to prevent further escalation. "Translate, Korath, please don't kill him." The AI's voice, remarkably calm given the chaos, relayed her plea. Korath paused, his massive form looming over the now kneeling Halvorsen, one clawed hand raised for what would surely be a fatal strike. After what seemed an eternity, Korath lowered his hand. He turned to face Alara, his exoskeleton gradually shifting from battle crimson to a more neutral hue. "Translation: the threat is neutralized, the pack is secure." Alara sagged against the nearest surface in relief. "Thank you," she breathed. Then, gathering herself, she addressed Halverson. "Commander, are you injured?" The man's face was ashen, his composure shattered. "What? What is that thing?" he whispered. "Not a thing," Alara corrected firmly. "A sentient being who just chose to spare your life despite your attack. I suggest we all take a moment to recalibrate our approach to this situation." Over the next few hours, a fragile truce was established. The security officers were treated for their injuries, mostly bruises and minor fractures, and confined to the oversight vessel. Halverson, shaken but stubborn, insisted on maintaining a corporate presence on the station while awaiting further instructions from Iridia Governorate. Alara, for her part, used the time to continue her study of Korath's biology and to improve the translation protocols. The Zathar remained near her constantly, a silent, imposing presence that seemed to have appointed itself her personal guardian. "Mercury," she asked during a rare moment alone in her quarters, "what's your assessment of Korath's behavior? The territorial bonding he mentioned. Is it consistent with known Zathar psychology?" "There is limited data for comparison," the AI replied. "However, what information exists suggests that Zathar rarely form bonds outside their own species. And when they do, the relationship is typically one of absolute dominance, rather than protective partnership." "So what's different here?" Alara mused, more to herself than to Mercury. "Perhaps," the AI ventured, "the unique circumstances of your intervention, saving his life despite the risk to your own, treating him with respect rather than fear, triggered a response outside typical Zathar behavioral parameters." Alara considered this. "A cultural exception, then. Interesting. I would characterize it more as an evolutionary adaptation." Mercury countered. "The Zathar are apex predators, but they are also highly intelligent. The capacity to recognize and reciprocate beneficial cross-species interaction would confer survival advantages in a complex galactic ecosystem." "You make it sound so clinical," Alara said with a small smile. "What if he's just grateful?" "That would be a remarkably human interpretation of alien psychology." "Dr. Miles, maybe gratitude isn't uniquely human," she replied softly. "Maybe it's one of those universal constants, like the drive to survive." Their philosophical discussion was interrupted by an urgent alert from the station's communication system. "Dr. Miles, multiple vessels have entered the Iridia system and are on approach vector to the station." Mercury reported. "Configuration suggests a military task force rather than corporate security." Alara felt her blood run cold. "Who's military? Earth Central?" "Negative. The vessels appear to be a joint task force representing several human colonies and corporate entities. They are broadcasting containment and neutralization protocols. Their stated mission is to address the Zathar threat." "How did they mobilize so quickly?" Alara wondered aloud, already moving toward the door. "Halverson must have sent a priority alert before I restricted communications." She found Korath in the observation dome, his massive form silhouetted against the backdrop of Iridia's crystalline desert. He turned as she entered, his exoskeleton shifting in what she had come to recognize as acknowledgement. "Mercury, tell him we have a situation," she said, moving to stand beside the Zathar. "Multiple human vessels are approaching with hostile intent. They're coming for him." After the translation, Korath's response was calm, almost expectant. "He says, the prey mass is to hunt the hunter. This is natural." "There's nothing natural about this," Alara said grimly. "They're reacting out of fear and ignorance. Mercury, open a channel to the approaching task force. Maybe we can still reason with them." Before Mercury could comply, Korath placed a clawed hand gently on Alara's shoulder, the first time he had initiated physical contact. His vocalizations were soft but insistent. Translation: "No words will turn the prey from its fear, but I can show strength that will make them reconsider. My ship, take me there." Alara looked up at him, confusion clear on her face. "Your ship is damaged beyond repair. What could you possibly—" "Dr. Miles," Mercury interrupted. "The task force has established orbital positions around Iridia. They are charging weapon systems. Estimated time to firing range, 12 minutes. Alara made her decision. "Mercury, prep the rover. We're making a run for the crash site." The journey to the southern canyon was a race against time, with Alara pushing the rover to its structural limits. Beside her, Korath sat in tense silence, his exoskeleton occasionally rippling with energy patterns that seemed to intensify as they drew closer to his crashed vessel. "What exactly are you planning?" Alara asked as they crested the canyon ridge. "That ship won't fly again, not without a full salvage operation and proper shipyard facilities." Mercury translated, and Korath's response was cryptic. Translation: "The ship and I are one. What sleeps can awaken." They reached the crash site with barely minutes to spare. The task force vessels were now visible in Iridia's sky as bright points of light, drawing steadily closer to Aurelia Station's position. Korath moved with purpose toward his downed vessel, his massive form navigating the crystalline sand with surprising grace. Alara followed, her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding her anxiety about the approaching threat. At the ship's ruptured hull, Korath paused, placing both clawed hands against the biometallic surface. The material seemed to respond to his touch, rippling and shifting as though awakening from dormancy. He turned to Alara, his vocalizations urgent. Translation: "Stand back. What comes next may harm you." Alara retreated to what she hoped was a safe distance, watching in fascination as Korath entered the ship through the same breach she had used days earlier to rescue him. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then, a low hum began to emanate from the vessel, a sound that grew steadily in both volume and pitch, until Alara could feel it vibrating through her environmental suit. "Mercury, what's happening?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the increasing drone. "Unknown, Dr. Miles. I am detecting a rapid increase in energy signatures consistent with Zathar technology, but the specific process is not in our database." The humming reached a crescendo, and then, in a display that defied Alara's understanding of physics, portions of the ship began to detach, not breaking apart, but separating into distinct components that hovered in the air around the main hull. These fragments, some as small as her fist and others larger than the rover, began to pulse with the same energy patterns she had observed in Korath's exoskeleton. And then Korath himself emerged from the breach, but changed. Parts of the ship's biometallic structure had somehow integrated with his exoskeleton, enhancing and extending his natural armor. Energy coursed visibly through his form, and the floating components of the vessel orbited him like satellites around a planet. "Mercury," Alara whispered, awestruck. "Are you recording this?" "Affirmative, Dr. Miles. Though I doubt our instruments are capable of capturing the full spectrum of what is occurring." Korath turned toward her, his transformed appearance both beautiful and terrifying. When he spoke, his vocalizations had a new resonance that Mercury's translation system struggled to interpret. "Approximate translation: the ship and hunter are rejoined. Now I will show the prey fleet why Zathar are feared across the stars." Before Alara could respond, Korath raised both arms toward the sky. The orbiting ship components aligned themselves in a complex geometric pattern above him, and then, with a surge of energy that momentarily blinded Alara's visual sensors, a beam of concentrated power shot upward toward the approaching task force. In the upper atmosphere, the beam connected with the lead vessel, a heavy cruiser designed for planetary bombardment. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, to Alara's horror and amazement, the cruiser's hull began to glow, first red, then white-hot, before disintegrating into a cloud of superheated plasma that illuminated Iridia's sky like a newborn star. "Mercury," Alara gasped. "What just happened?" "The Zathar appears to have weaponized his ship's power core," the AI replied, its voice modulated to convey appropriate gravity. The energy discharge converted the cruiser's molecular structure directly to plasma state. The task force vessels are breaking formation and attempting evasive maneuvers. But Korath was not finished. With mechanical precision, he redirected his improvised weapon, targeting vessel after vessel. Some managed to raise shields that deflected the energy beam temporarily, but the power Korath was channeling simply intensified until it overwhelmed their defenses. Within minutes, the task force was reduced to scattered debris and dissipating plasma clouds in Iridia's upper atmosphere. As the final vessel disintegrated, Korath lowered his arms. The orbiting ship components gradually descended, some reintegrating with the main hull, others settling into the crystalline sand like metallic seeds. The energy coursing through his enhanced exoskeleton dimmed to a subtle glow. He turned to face Alara, who stood frozen in shock at the display of devastating power she had just witnessed. The Zathar approached her slowly, his movements deliberate, as though concerned he might frighten her. "Mercury," she said quietly. "Ask him why he did that." After the translation, Korath's response was simple and direct. Translation: "They threatened my pack, the healer who fed the dying hunter. This is the way of Zathar, absolute protection for those who earn it." Alara struggled to reconcile her scientific mission of understanding and preserving life with the destruction she had just witnessed. Tell him I understand his intention was to protect, but that those ships contained living beings, hundreds of them. Ask him if there wasn't another way." Korath's answer, when it came, contained a nuance that surprised her. Translation: "The first ship, yes. It was necessary to show true strength. The others could have retreated. They chose to continue threat. Different choice, different outcome." A simple calculus of power and choice, Alara realized. To Korath, he had merely demonstrated his superior strength and given his opponents the opportunity to withdraw. When they persisted, their fate was sealed by their own decision. "What happens now?" she asked, gesturing to the transformed Zathar and the partially reactivated ship. Korath considered her question for a long moment before responding. Translation: "Now the galaxy will know that Alara Miles is under Zathar protection. The healer's work will continue without interference. This is my oath." The implications of that statement, both for her personally and for human-Zathar relations, were staggering. Alara found herself at a crossroads that no human had ever faced before. The beneficiary of an alien predator's absolute protection, with all the power and peril that entailed. "Mercury," she said at last, "tell him I accept his protection, but that I hope we can find a path forward that involves less destruction. Tell him I believe our species can learn from each other, if given the chance." After the translation, Korath made a gesture she had not seen before, a crossing of his clawed hands over the center of his chest. Translation: "The hunter learns from the healer. This is why the Zathar feared humans. Not your weapons, but your strange strength that turns enemies to allies. It is worthy of study." Alara smiled, recognizing in those words a scientist's curiosity, not unlike her own. "Then we'll study together." In the days that followed, news of the destroyed task force spread across human space, creating waves of panic, outrage, and, in some quarters, reluctant admiration. Diplomatic envoys from Earth Central Command and even representatives from other alien species arrived in the Iridia system, all seeking to understand the unprecedented alliance between a human scientist and a Zathar warrior. Aurelia Station, once a forgotten outpost on a desolate world, was redesignated as the Miles Embassy, a neutral ground where species could meet under the protection of the strange partnership that had formed there. Alara's research received full funding under newly established Compassion Doctrine protocols, which emphasized cross-species cooperation and medical exchange. Korath, for his part, became something of an ambassador for his kind, the first Zathar in recorded history to form a bond with another species. Through him, humans began to understand the complex honor codes and territorial instincts that drove Zathar society, while the Zathar Dominion cautiously acknowledged that perhaps there was strength in forms other than conquest. As for Alara, she continued her work with renewed purpose, expanding her research beyond the sandworms of Iridia to encompass a broader study of life throughout the galaxy. With Korath at her side, sometimes guardian, sometimes research partner, always a reminder of the unexpected paths compassion could open, she pushed the boundaries of xenobiology and interspecies relations. One evening, as Iridia's twin suns set over the crystalline desert, Alara stood in the observation dome of what had once been Aurelia Station, recording her personal log. "It's been one standard year since I found Korath in that crashed ship," she said, watching as the Zathar moved through the newly expanded research facilities below, instructing a group of wide-eyed human scientists in the basics of his species' biological systems. "1 year since I made the decision to save a life that everyone would have said was better left to end." She paused, considering the magnitude of what had transpired since that fateful day. "I only fed him when he was dying," she continued softly. "Now he burns worlds to keep me safe, and perhaps, one day, I can teach the galaxy to do the same for each other. Not the burning part," she added with a smile, "but the protecting, the understanding that life, in all its forms, is worth preserving, worth studying, worth connecting with." As if sensing her attention, Korath looked up toward the observation dome. Even at a distance, Alara could see the subtle ripple of acknowledgement pass through his exoskeleton, a greeting between beings who had bridged the vast divide between their species through the simplest and most profound of connections: compassion freely given and honor freely returned. "End log," Alara said, still smiling as she turned to join her unlikely friend below.